So then I guess that bleeds me into Passover. Passover, still playing, final week. Well, it depends on when people see it. So. But we plan to do this with
playing until October 10th at the August Wilson Theater.
There it is. Whoop. There it is.
There it is.
Here's what I love. And like seeing some of your past speeches and like talks about the show, I reflect on the idea of the promised land. And sometimes in Exodus, there's this debate of the promised land, or did they mean the promised land? And those are two very different thoughts. The idea of like, this is a promised land. It's like, this is entitlement. This is reward for suffering. This is all this that we're going through. And the promised land is almost a transition. It's a hope for. It's You get what I'm saying? And I wonder, when you think and look at this play of the Passover, and especially the transition now, where does that place you? In a promised or a promised land?
I always place it in a promise land. I think that the ideology of a promised land is one that is against entitlement. Because when you look at the original text, the people had to keep alive the hope of a promise during the 40 years in the wilderness. And it is shameful for any of us who have been wilderness people to turn around and become people of entitlement. So when I think about Moses and Kitch on the block, when I think about people in this country, whether they live on the block, whether they live in poverty, whether they are refugees, whether they are victims of war, I think of people who are struggling to keep a promise alive. And I think about what this country, I live down here, I can sometimes see the Statue of Liberty. That's a promise. There was a time when the United States of America was a land of promise. Come here and you will live a better life. But then you look at characters like Moses and Kitch, people like Moses and Kitch, Black people who built it, and that promise needs to be fulfilled completely in our lives today, yesterday.
What does that fulfillment look like?
It looks like the ability to be Black and American and live without fear of death, of destruction of life, of all that we've built up. Fear, the end of fear that our legacy and that our future will be cut off, or that someone can walk in to your life and take it away. I think that promise for Black people looks like the full enjoyment of our citizens as Americans, of our citizenship. The promise of protection, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
I love that. Let's talk about the pursuit then. You are the first playwright out the gate. You are the first playwright out the gate to present a work. And what I think about when I see you is, that's the pipeline. Like, there is a new pipeline being established. And then I go back to this idea of entitlement, seeing how this play is kind of like a pushback against entitlement. You don't come in to then become the oppressor. You don't do this. So the journey you went on to get here, do you feel that that's a journey that should be followed by others? Or do you believe that through the pipeline, there is a sense of entitlement of, you don't have to go through the same struggles I went through because it wasn't right to begin with?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think part of the reason that I insisted on being a producer for this show is that I want to learn how the sausage is made, so that when I move forward, I can not only produce my own work in the future, but I can be someone who can help other artists of color, other Black artists, other artists of the global majority produce at this level. I'm not saying that I'm going to do that immediately, but that's definitely in my future. I absolutely want to be someone who can. who can, and I don't necessarily, the pipeline model is one model, but I think it's because pipes are so straight. I don't actually love that model. I think everybody's journey ebbs and flows. I think everybody's journey has lots of twists and turns. But if I can be someone who can guide you through those twists and turns and get you to a place where your work can be seen on a Broadway stage, yes, I think that's absolutely part of my mantle moving forward.
This is what I love. I always love, what region are people from? For everyone that doesn't know, Tony is from California, specifically Southern California. Even more specific, Black. Los Angeles, right?
Los Angeles.
What I love about people from Los Angeles is you really get the ebb and flow. I've even heard in some interviews, you talk about the waves, you talk about the ease, you talk about that.
I am a child of the water.
How?
Yeah, my yeah.
Cancer rising?
Cancer rising.
I'm a Cancer, period. I'm not really into the astrology, but I'm figuring it out. But what is it about the water? Because Passover, the water is kind of important to the piece.
The water is deeply important to the play.
So what does that represent? What does that do for you? Internally, what is that?
The water is, water is life. It's rhythm. It's, ironically, water is both the rhythm, which is something that is old, something that is repeated, something that returns, but it's also newness. And I think in Passover, we have both of those things. On one hand, you have a story and a cycle that is repeating, and it is as constant as the waves, as constant as the waves. The story is going to keep happening. It's going to happen so much that you will feel absurd, right? Mm-hmm. Racism is absurd. Think about it. It's as absurd as any clown bit that you've ever seen. Think of Charlie Chaplin doing some clown thing. That's as absurd as racism. On one hand, there is the rhythm of the wave that is constant. But on the other hand, the water is life, and you know that when the wave comes in, it is bringing new life. When Moses and Kitch walk across that river, they are walking across to new life. You cannot have new life without water that is going to give birth to it. And so I think for me, the water is both. On one hand, yes, it's the same story. We need to, how do we break that pattern? How do we make the river of these young Black men flow in a different way?